Back in 2010, a man from Santa Fe known as Forrest Fenn created a treasure hunt. In order to locate that treasure, he provided us with a 24-line poem. And he told us that the treasure chest was somewhere in the mountains north of Santa Fe in the Rockies. And ultimately, we discovered that it was either in New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, or Montana. And it was above 5,000 feet and below 10,200 feet. In order to locate that treasure, you had to solve the poem. And I believe that in order to properly solve the poem, it's important that you understand the context of the poem. And in order to do that, I'm going to analyze the poem in this video and provide you with that information. I'm not going to discuss any solution here. I'm going to try to keep it as generic as possible so that it'll work with any solution. So why does it matter? Well, look, remember back in the early days of school, learning English language by constantly having tests, drills, reading comprehension tests, such as book reports? Many people are bored with that. And for being bored, I have to blame the teacher because it doesn't have to be that way. Look, being an expert is not always your goal, but having some good background knowledge will become very useful in your later life, even if you never become a writer or a poet. Okay. You want to be able to comprehend what you read. You don't want to be illiterate because that's going to cause you a lot of problems down the road. Forrest Fenn knew that grammar and context were important. Forrest Fenn knew that, and he talked about it constantly, even in The Thrill of the Chase. He took that subject in junior college for a few semesters. He even created a want ad that I showed you guys for an English textbook so that he could study literature back in 1942. Yeah. So he was definitely interested in English grammar. Not only that, but he dedicated the entire first chapter in The Thrill of the Chase called Important Literature, where he discusses different processes used by various famous authors, such as Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Salinger. Okay. He also discusses various other people who were competent writers: Eric Sloane, Shakespeare, Millais. In The Thrill of the Chase, he discusses the meaning of words. For example, tenacity. He abused that word in the book. Basically, he gives us plenty of examples of him being tenacious. In other words, he told us that he chased his wife around. He was constantly pursuing her, right? And then he tells us that his friends told him, you know, Peggy's just too good for you. And Forrest Fenn turned around and he said, well, you know, tenacity was never one of my strong points. What? He just got done explaining how tenacious he was. And then he's going to say that tenacity was not one of his strong points. Okay. He does that on purpose. I think he knows the rules for sure. And he likes to bend them to draw attention to something. Okay. And I believe that all of that stuff is important. Also, in Moby Dickens' interview, he discusses the word several, Several. And he asks everybody in the audience, do you know what that word means? And none of them got the correct answer. And it was interesting. And it just proves his point that, you know, as time goes on, as adults, we forget the stuff that we learned when we were back in grade school. And even worse, we tend to misuse words. We don't really understand what they mean. And we never really have a reason to look them up because the people we're talking to will understand us. You're going to find many examples of how Forrest Fenn liked English, and he liked to use it for effect and use it to draw attention to things. I'm going to leave some links to Dal's YouTube channel videos, and at least 4 of them. They're really good to watch. They're pretty funny, and they kind of explain what I'm talking about here. So basically, no matter what you're reading, a novel, a poem, or any other document, it is important that you understand what the author is trying to convey. In elementary school, probably around 3rd grade, we begin to learn the basics of grammar and reading comprehension. As time goes on, we grow older, we tend to forget most of what we learned, and we retain just enough to get by in life. In most cases, that's fine. It's not going to hinder your ability to enjoy a novel or a poem for what it is. But having said that, when you're faced with something that you need to thoroughly understand, for example, a poem in a treasure hunt challenge, it is important that you fully comprehend what you're reading. In order to do that, we typically begin by breaking down the text into its components, such as phrases, clauses, so that we can clearly see how they relate to each other and form sentences. We want to know the specific role each phrase, clause, and word has and how it impacts the meaning of the overall sentence and also the overall stanza and also the poem overall globally. And my goal is to teach you how to do that with the Forrest Fenn poem in this video. I'm not going to get into major grammar details because it would take me days to explain grammar to you. I am only going to cover things that are related to the poem. And to be honest, the poem is pretty straightforward. There is no subterfuge, no tricks are being played, and for the most part, Forrest Fenn followed all the grammar rules, including punctuation. As you may know, and that was interesting because as you may know, many poems do not contain punctuation. Yet Forrest Fenn punctuated his. Why did he do that? I believe he did it because he wanted to make sure that everything that you read was not ambiguous. It was clear and concise and precise and to the point. Okay. He wanted you to have a challenge to locate the treasure if you took the time to analyze the precision he put into the poem. That's basically it in a nutshell. And you don't have to be an English major, so don't let this video scare you. In fact, show it to a child or your grandchild. They'll probably do it better than you or I because this stuff is still fresh in our minds. Okay. I'm going to be 60 years old this month. So this stuff is not fresh in my mind. But I've been spending the last few years doing refreshers and restudying it in order to be able to understand the poem. I'm trying to kind of push you up that ladder relatively quick. I also want you to understand that reading is not subject to personal bias. Now, you might interpret the overall story slightly different, but in the text, the way you actually read it and the way the phrases work with each other is based completely on how the author wrote it. It's not subjective in any way. Okay. The only way it becomes subjective is if you don't read it as Forrest Fenn wrote it. In other words, we can't remove any punctuation. We can't add any punctuation. And we can't change any of the words. Because if we did that, we'd be essentially breaking the poem. Now, we don't want to correct Forrest Fenn's mistakes. In fact, we just want to be smart enough to know where they may be so that we could find out how he was using them to his advantage. So, although you don't have to be an English major, knowing the basic rules of grammar is important because if you don't, you're not going to be able to see where the rules are meant. Perhaps that's why Forrest discussed rules so often and why he was constantly making references to looking things up. He also spent a lot of time discussing literature and poetry in his books. His books are riddled with such things. He told us over and over, analyze the poem. Do not discount any words. And when a poem is precisely followed, it'll lead you to the end of my rainbow and the treasure. Okay. He even told us that knowing the words where warm waters halt and knowing that it's in the Rocky Mountains north of Santa Fe is not enough information to locate where warm waters halt on any map. So right there, if you're cracking open a map and trying to find places synonymous with the words where warm waters halt, you're not going to find where warm waters halt. It's too vague. There's too many places, and you're inserting personal bias. He's telling you that you need the rest of the poem in order to solve it. Now, in this video, I'm not going to be discussing any solve, like I said before, including my own. I'm not going to be sliding any lines. There's not going to be any grids. I'm not going to add or remove anything. I want to keep this completely generic so that you can use it for any solve. And once you know how to interpret the poem, all you need to do is follow it precisely and use it to solve the clues. Once that is done, you're ready to go to a map and find the physical location of the clues for the boots on the ground part. Remember, at first, the clues in the poem are meant to be in your imagination. They are not real. Okay, look up the word imagination. It's meant to paint a picture in your mind. So the only place that they exist is in the poem. Where is the home of Brown? Well, the home of Brown would be somewhere above line 8 because that's where it says Elma Brown. Okay, where do warm waters halt? They halt on line 5 at the end. Where's the canyon? Down. It's below the home of Brown. So it's got to begin on the edge and go down into the text that's below, put in below the home Brown. So it's somewhere at line 9. Don't get involved in trying to figure out what Brown means. Don't think that you can go to a map and say Molly Brown or brown trout or this brown or that. That's not the way it works. Only use your imagination. It's only in the poem at this point. Forrest Fenn has told you that you have to solve the clues, okay? And all the clues are required just to determine where to start. So that's what I'm going to focus on here. And the way to begin all that, like I said, is through a grammar analysis of the poem. We're going to determine the structure. We're going to determine where the clauses and phrases are and how they, what part of speech they represent and how they all interact with each other. Once we do that, we know we're properly reading the poem. Then we're actually ready to go in there and try to start solving the clues to figure out where we start. Once we figure out the starting point, okay, we're ready to go to that place on a map, and then the rest of the clues are going to fall into place. But I'm not going to do that part. I'm not going to do the solution part. I'm only going to tell you the first part of how to analyze the poem. If you want to see more information about the solution, just see the video I put out there. So I want to begin this by discussing basic grammar information, just to give you kind of a refresher, because I'm sure many of you adults, and you probably did this, 20, 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. So let me just go over a real simple refresher. So here's a basic grammar. I'm going to go over parts of speech, right? I'm not going to get into real strict details because a lot of these categories that I'm showing you here, there are more details. There's subcategories and there's deeper definitions of everything. But again, this is not really a video to teach you grammar. It would take me months, weeks to do that. People spend years learning grammar. I'm not going to do it in a 1 or 2 hour video. So I'm just trying to give you the basics here, okay? For example, I describe what a noun is. Noun represents a person, place, thing, or an idea. The answer, what or who is it? What is its name, and so on, right? They can be used as subjects, direct objects, indirect objects, objects of preposition, predicate nouns, okay? Some examples, simple examples are dog, cat, trove, courage, Sam, book, okay? Now, obviously, like I said, you have different types of noun. You have proper nouns, there's too many of them to cover here. The same thing is true with all of these classifications, different parts, speech, right? So pronouns, they represent or take the place of a noun. Example, I, we, you, he, she, it, they, his, hers. A verb shows an action. That's a dynamic verb. And sometimes they show a state, okay? Meaning they provide more information about the subject or the direct object. How is it? Or what is occurring, okay? Examples of those would be is, are, okay. If I say, for example, Troy is cool, that's a stative verb. That's not an action. You can't is something, all right? So anything that follows the word is probably going to be an adjective. It's going to be operating as an adjective no matter what it is, okay? So, and it's going to refer back to Troy. Troy is cool. And with the word is, you can basically replace it with an equal sign. Troy equals cool, If I say it is raining, okay, it equals rain, okay. I mean, that's how simple that a stative verb is. But just keep in mind that I pointed that out because a lot of people from grammar school might think that all verbs are actions. Okay, well that's not true. Okay. The other thing I want to point out is that there's two different verb types, right? You have verbs that can. You have auxiliary verbs, helping verbs, linking verbs. Okay, I'm not going to get into all of the different types. I'm going to discuss them as we come across them. But also keep in mind that verbs have a form in which they would operate. For example, some verbs might only be what they call transitive. A transitive verb requires an object, okay? And then they might be intransitive, which means it doesn't have an object. In other words, it's not an action you perform on something. It's intransitive. But if it's transitive, it's an action that you're applying to something. I hit the ball. Okay, so the ball is the object that I hit, and hit would require, in that case, in the way I used it, it would require a direct object. Okay, but keep in mind that some verbs could work with or without direct objects. It all depends on how they're being used. For example, I could say my car was hit, and I'm using it intransitively there. We don't know what hit my car. I'm just saying my car was hit. All right. So just keep that in mind. Now we have adjectives. Adjectives describe or define a noun or a pronoun. That's all they modify or describe. They can't modify any other word or phrase type. They answer questions like how many, what color, what size, what type, etc. Example: big, small, blue, long, happy. Note that, again, I'm not going to break these down into subcategories, but there are certain things underneath that fall underneath the adjective category, such as articles and determiners. And I'm going to be kind of treating them all like adjectives here, because I really don't want to explain all the different types, but I had to explain those because those are so popular and they're going to be used in the poem. I want you to understand what they are. But an article is basically providing information about the adjective to help make the nouns more specific. In other words, like I said before, the boy, a boy. A boy can be any boy, but the boy is a boy that you know. Now, determiners, they would help provide information to about the who of a noun, okay? Whose car? My car, our car, your car, his car, her car, this car. Okay, that's what a determiner is used for. And again, keep in mind that some of these words in here can be used in other ways. Okay, the only way to determine their usage is to find out their placement within the sentence and how they're being used. Okay, then we have adverbs. Adverbs give information about a verb, adjective, or another adverb. They can't modify nouns. They only modify adjectives, verbs, and other adverbs. And they help answer questions such as how, when, where, to what extent, for the verb, for example. Okay. Why, what reason? Example: slowly, quickly, everywhere, very, quite. Now we have these things called prepositions. Preposition expresses a relationship to another word or an element within that clause or phrase. For example, some of them specify, let's say, a time, some of them specify a location, and so on. Some examples of prepositions are in, on, by, to, from, since, for, of. Okay, there's a lot of prepositions, and they're not always single words. Okay, sometimes there are many phrases, and the phrase itself is a preposition. They became so popular over the years being used, they've been classified, the group is classified as a preposition. I don't want to go over all any of that stuff here. And Forrest Fenn doesn't use any of them in a poem anyway. Then we have conjunctions. Okay. Conjunctions join phrases, clauses, or words within the same clause. So, in other words, it could join, let's say, adjectives. It could join two standalone adjectives. It could join two standalone verbs. They could join two nouns, two direct objects, or they could join two independent clauses, or they could join, like two adverb phrases, like not far is a phrase. Too far to walk is another phrase. So you would have and then a coordinating conjunction is what joins them, right? The coordinating junctions, there's only 7 of them. And a good acronym to remember them is FAMBOYS. And they are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. That's all of the coordinating conjunctions. Think of those as like a balance scale, okay? And depending on which coordinating conjunction you use, the meaning will change. So like and is kind of like additive, like this and this. Okay? This, not that is nor. But shows contrast, or this or that, okay? So you can look up the meanings of each one of those as a conjunction to find out how they impact the sentence. I'm not going to do that here. This would take forever. Also, we have subordinating conjunctions. Here are some of them: as, if, so, that, because, why, who. Those are used to join dependent clauses to independent clauses, basically. And they're providing the clauses, as you'll see, are going to provide different information to the overall sentence itself. Okay, so besides those words that we just went over to different speech parts, and by the way, like I said, those are not all of the speech parts of speech. There are more, but I'm not going to get into because this is not a grammar tutorial. This is just instruction on how to read the poem. I'm just giving you a brief overview. A phrase is a small group of words that form a meaningful grammatical unit. They have no meaning if they stand alone, and they cannot stand on its own as a sentence. A phrase might have a noun and it might have a verb, but it'll never have both. And it may have neither of them. Okay. We have different types of phrases: verb phrases, noun phrases, prepositional phrases, adjective phrases, adverb phrases, so on and so forth. As I said, they're not powerful enough to become sentences or even clauses. A clause is a group of words and phrases that form the basic unit of grammar, and it must contain both the subject and a verb. Okay. Here are a few clause types. We have an independent clause. They can stand on their own as a full sentence. It has complete meaning, and it's also the main clause of the sentence. Every sentence must have at least one independent clause, otherwise it's not a sentence. Now, a dependent clause, they depend on at least one or more independent clauses to complete the meaning of the sentence. They're there to provide additional information to the main clause. The information they provide, it depends on the type of dependent clause it is. They can work as nouns, adjectives, or adverbs. The same thing is true with phrases. Keep in mind that, like I said, an adjective phrase is going to work as an adjective. So even though you read the parts of speech, noun, adverb, adjective, don't think that only single words play that role. In this case, a whole clause is working collectively as a noun or an adjective or an adverb. Same thing with phrases. In other words, they're building blocks. You're constructing a sentence. You're completing the meaning, right? Using these building blocks of phrases, words, and then dependent clauses combined with one or more independent clauses is going to make a full sentence. Or you can have an independent clause on its own. Then we have objects. Now, there are many different types of objects, so I'm only going to go over the ones that Forrest Fenn used in his poem primarily. And there are words, phrases, or clauses that perform a different grammatical function, again, depending on their type, just like above. If it's a clause, then it's going to fill the role of a noun. If it's a noun, if it's filling the role as a noun, then it could be a direct object, an indirect object, okay, object of preposition, or an object of an infinitive, okay. So a direct object, basically, I wanted to go over this. It answers the question of what or whom the verb is operating on. In other words, Troy hit the ball. Well, the ball is a direct object. It's saying, what did I hit? Whom did I hit? I hit the ball. An indirect object, and indirect objects are optional, okay? And an indirect object will only exist if a direct object exists. If there is no direct object, there will never be an indirect object. Also, depending on how the verb is being used, it may require a direct object, okay? For example, if it's being used transitively as a transitive verb, it requires a direct object. All verbs acting as transitive verbs need a direct object. When they have direct object, it may or may not have an indirect object. The indirect object is answering the question to who, for whom, and it's usually about the direct object of the verb. And be careful, by the way, of confusing direct objects with subject complements. Now, I know a complement is basically modifying a noun or a pronoun to provide information or to rename it if it's a noun. Okay. So if the object is a noun that's on the right side and it's the complement is a noun, that means it's renaming whatever is on the left. If I said Troy is a doctor, right? I'm renaming that a doctor is not an object. It's working as a noun, but it's renaming. In other words, I could put the equal sign there and say Troy equals a doctor. I can replace is with an equal. So that is called the subject complement. Again, because we're using and to be verbs like is, are, they always usually are used with a subject complement. So keep that in mind, whether or not it's a direct object or functioning as a complement. And also remember, again, an entire clause or an entire phrase can be an object complement or an object. A good indication that it's not a direct object is if it's being used intransitively. That's the main point I want to get across there. So let's move on. Let's do like some basic, easy sentences first, just to get a little bit of practice. Okay, so the first thing I like to do is locate the verbs, the main verbs. And I'm going to do that by putting a box around them. So the first sentence here, let's just do it now, is bark is the main verb. So the next thing I do after that is I like to locate the subject, which is either going to be a noun or a pronoun. Now, keep in mind, again, it could be a whole phrase, it could be a clause, but we're starting out simple here. So the subject in this case, who is doing the verb? Okay. Who or what? Okay. Well, the dog is bark. The dog is to bark. So the dog is our main subject. Now, so what is the word the? It's just the determiner. And the determiner is always going to be followed by a noun. And it's operating on that noun. So which dog? The dog. It's an article giving us a specific dog. Now, some people will probably say that this whole thing there is the subject, and that's right. But the reason why I'm breaking it down first into individual components is to teach you how the words all interact with each other. So let's go on to the second one now. Let's find the main verb. It's the same, bark. Okay. Let's find the subject. Who is doing the bark? Well, dog is doing the bark. So the dog bark. That's the subject. Right? So what about A? Well, A is the determiner. Which dog? A dog. But what about the rest of these here? Okay, well, we know that the is a determiner. Okay, so what about block? Okay, well, block is a noun. What about around? Well, round is a preposition right there. So this whole entire thing, like I said, a prepositional phrase begins with the preposition that ends with a noun and has optional determiners and adjectives between it. So the prepositional phrase is right here. And as a unit, this is working as an adjective, telling us more information about which dog it was. Now let's move on to the next one. Okay, we got a verb phrase here, was walking. And then we got met. So let's find the subject again. Okay, well, who's the subject for was walking? Who was doing the walking? The pronoun I. Okay, who is the one that met a man? I met a man, the pronoun I again. So those are subjects. Okay, well, what about any other nouns? Do we have any other nouns? Yeah, we got the street. What else we got here? We got any determiners? Yeah, we got one. Which street? The street. Okay, so again, the street. What about any other nouns? Do we have any other nouns? Yep. Man. What about any other determiners? Yep. A. Which man? A man. Okay. This, as a unit, is functioning as a direct object telling us who we met. What did we meet? We met a man. This is working as a direct object here. That phrase, noun phrase. Okay. This noun phrase or noun is preceded by a preposition. So this is a prepositional phrase. This one is functioning as an adverb telling us where we were walking, down the street. Okay. So what about the word as? What do we have going on here? Okay. As is being used as a subordinating conjunction. It begins a dependent clause. This is a dependent clause. This is the main theme or the main clause of the sentence. In other words, I could leave this out and just say, I met a man. That's a complete sentence. But this, if I came to you and said, as I was walking down the street, that doesn't mean anything on its own. It's incomplete. It's a fragment. Okay. So it is a clause because it's got a subject and a verb, but it doesn't have a complete meaning. It's not independent. Okay. It's a dependent clause. Now, I want to tell you, and I'm not really going to get into rules here, but this one is kind of important. And you'll see why much later. You see that comma there? That comma is required. And the reason why it's required is because anytime a dependent clause precedes an independent clause, you need a comma. If I were to reverse these clauses, then a comma wouldn't be required. In other words, if the independent clause comes first, followed by the dependent clause, you don't need the comma. So I could say, I met a man as I was walking down the street. Now I don't need any commas in that sentence. But because it's appearing here, the comma is required. Now think about this. If the comma wasn't there, we would have some ambiguity because it would saying, as I was walking down the street, I met a man. Does that mean that the street that you met the man on is where you were walking down? You know, see, it's not clear. Okay. That's why Forrest Fenn used punctuation in his poem, because it's not strictly a poem to just tell a story. He wanted you to follow precisely. But if he left any subterfuge or he broke the rules or did something wrong, he's drawing attention to it. But here, he's not breaking the rules in his poem, just like they're not broken here on this example. Okay. But I don't want to get into the rules all the time, but that's an important one. So remember, if a dependent clause appears before a main clause, it needs to have a comma after the dependent clause. And remember again, the clause always has a subject and a verb. A phrase like down the street might have a subject of street, it's got a noun, but it's not being used that way. It's a preposition followed by a noun. It doesn't have a subject and a verb. It's definitely a phrase. What kind of phrase? It's a prepositional phrase. Okay, a man. There's no verb there. So that's a noun phrase. Okay. And this is a complete sentence too, because I met. Got verb. We got verb noun, right? Verb noun. That's a complete thought. So we know that there's two clauses here. Now, I want to talk about context briefly here. So when we do the next sentence, okay, we're going to find the verb. The verb is, okay. The subject is the man or man. Okay. Now remember, this is a to be verb here. And remember what I said about subject complements. That's exactly what we have here. Okay. So this word is working like an adjective. And what it's doing is providing more information to describe the man. Man equals drunk. Man is drunk. Okay. Which man? Well, we got a determiner. We got the man. Okay. Now I want to discuss the determiner specifically here. Let's say that this year was all in the same stanza, or it was all part of the same paragraph in the story or whatever, right? If this line, like it comes after this line, obviously, if that were the case, this when I say the man, I'm being specific. You should know who it is. Clearly, in this case, clearly that this man down here is the same man that I met up here. Well, up here, I'm being vague. I'm saying I met a man. I'm not telling you which specific man. Down here, I'm telling you a specific man is drunk. So, in other words, obviously, the man I'm talking about was this man. We know that. But if we didn't read this sentence and all we had is this sentence up here, he's not getting specific. He's saying a man, it could be any man. Okay. But when I say the man, I'm talking about that. Imagine you're up by Niagara Falls, okay? And you're standing there, and we decide to go. We're about, let's say, a half hour away from Niagara Falls, and we're eating dinner or lunch or something like that, right? And I tell you, I say, hey, let's go to the falls after we're done here. Is there going to be any question as to what falls I'm talking about? Now, obviously, there are other falls in that state, but we're talking about Niagara Falls. It's pretty obvious, you know. I mean, if we're in Arizona and I say, let's go to the canyon, we're probably talking about the Grand Canyon. Obvious, right? I mean, it's obvious, right? That's what the would be specific. The author is assuming you know what he's talking about, or you should know it by that time that you read this line. So basically, we're going to go and find all the verbs and verb phrases, and then we're going to go ahead and find the subject of each of those verbs. Then we're going to go ahead and break it down even further so that we reach a point that we can construct phrases and clauses so that we can determine the structure and meaning of everything in the poem. Once we fully understand the poem, we can see the big picture. Okay. How does that sentence function within the paragraph or stanza? It's very important when a sentence contains pronouns such as it or other determiners. The reason is that they will sometimes refer to things outside of the current sentence, and in some cases to other sentences or paragraphs or stanzas at the poem or story level. So the follow up to the sentence breakdown is a global big picture analysis. But this should be easier now that you have a thorough understanding of the context of the poem. As you get more practice by reading other books, stories, and poems, the task that I'm about to show you is going to become easier. Eventually, your brain will figure out all this out while you're actually reading the paragraph. But right now, at this time, your mind needs to be retrained because it's been so long since you did these activities and you may have been misusing or simply forgetting things. We need to get it back into your head. Okay. Because unless you spent a lot of time through your life reading and practicing grammar, you've incorrectly trained your mind and you've been misusing things. It's time to fix that up. So to wrap this up, as I said earlier, reading properly is not something that's subjective. How you properly read English is not a matter of personal opinion or personal interpretation. That'll be like saying 2 plus 2 is not equal to 4 because you interpret it as 3 or something. The only things that are subjective are going to be the clue answers themselves. And for that, I leave you with this hint. Remember, the poem is a story. Use only your imagination for now. Assume that the places mentioned in the poem only exist in the poem. They're imaginary. They're not real. Where is the home brown? It's on line 8. What is below the home brown? The lines beneath it. What do where warm water salt? Where do warm water salt? On the last letter of line 5. Remember, at this point, everything is in your imagination and in a poem. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Read and comprehend the poem, and then read it again, but this time do precisely what it tells you. But do it in the poem and your imagination only. I'm serious. Try this. It's really going to open your eyes, and you'll have no doubt where to begin it in the physical or real world when you go boots on the ground. And finally, you can crack open the right map that defines the physical area where warm waters halt. Watch how the clues, when combined with the information on site, all going to make perfect sense. Nothing in the poem will be directly named on the map, but the meaning of each clue will match the features found and described on site in the kiosks and or on the maps. There'll be no other information outside the poem or on site that you need. And also, the other good thing about this is that you're going to be able to rule out bad solves because now you're going to know the exact steps that the poem takes you through. And one final thing to keep in mind again, I want to make sure you remember this. Clues, entire phrases or clauses can substitute for a single part of speech. And the most important are going to be pronouns such as it. They can refer back to the beginning of the poem. Think of a stanza as a computer program, and you are stepping through it from clue to clue. Sure, at a high level, you can say it is your quest, but more accurately, you could say it contains the steps we need to follow to the treasure in your imagination and in the poem. Remember that. So we're going to go ahead and work on the poem now. And what I'm going to do is highlight main verbs in green. I'm going to draw a box around them. Infinitives are verbs being used as gerunds, for example, are going to be underlined in green. Subjects are going to be boxed in blue. Nouns are going to be underlined. Okay. Adjectives will be yellow. Adverbs will be purple. Determinants will be light gray. Prepositions are brown. Conjunctions are red. Pronouns are going to be light blue. You don't need to remember that because I'm going to go ahead and discuss that while we go through the poem. So here comes the hard part, guys. But actually, I think you're going to enjoy it. And hopefully this will go pretty quick. Okay, here we go with the first stanza. Now, what I want to do to make this go by a little bit quicker is the first slides that I'm going to show for each stanza are going to break down the major components so that we can then evaluate how everything is working together. And basically, that'll be the final part for each stanza. So first, I'm not going to do that much talking. I'm just going to describe what the words are, and then I'll explain my choices later. So let's go on. So as you know, the first thing we want to do is locate the verbs and the verb phrases. And I've done that here. We have 3 verbs or verb phrases. We got have gone, can keep, and hint. Now, as you know, each one of those verbs is going to have a subject, the person that's performing the verb. Okay. In those, I have made square rectangles around them. For example, for have gone, who's the one that's gone? I, the pronoun I. So I put a square box around that. Who is the one that can keep? I can keep. So here we have the pronoun I again. Okay. And here I put I in parentheses because this isn't all in the same clause. It's sharing the same subject here in this case. We got I is the same person that can keep can also hint of rich is new and old. It's basically what that means. Over here, these are just nouns or pronouns that I've underlined. And again, I'm going to explain later their usage within this stanza and ultimately within the poem. So we have the nouns there, treasures, where, and riches. Now I like to go through and find the determiners. So we only have 2 determiners here. We have my and my. Whose treasures? My treasures. Whose secret? My secret. Those are the only 2 determiners that we have for the respective nouns. For adjectives, okay, we have bold. Bold is describing treasures. And then we have secret. Secret is being used as an adjective here. And then, of course, we have new and old. I've underlined them in yellow. Now I work on the prepositional phrases. Beginning up here, the first one we have is in. In is a preposition. The object of the preposition is there. In there. Okay. The second one we have is with. With is a preposition. The prepositional phrase, as you know, begins with a preposition and ends with a noun or a pronoun. And in between those two, you can have one or more determiners and adjectives. Here we just have with my treasures. That is the prepositional phrase. The final one that we have here is of. That's a preposition. The object of preposition is riches, of riches. Now I'm going to try to find the lone adverbs, okay? Ones that are just single words by themselves. Because remember, some of these phrases are working as adverbs or adjectives, but I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to do that in the final part. I'm just looking at the single words at this point so that we can then know how to divide up the phrases and clauses. So we only have one adverb in here, and it's alone. The final thing I like to look at is conjunctions. And as I said, we're going to be discussing subordinating conjunctions and coordinating conjunctions. Here we have as, which in this case is being used as a subordinating conjunction. And then we have three coordinating conjunctions. We have and over here, and over here, and down here. And the reason that we discovered those conjunctions now is that now that we kind of have the phrases broken up, we can see what those conjunctions are joining and linking, how we are building the sentence. Because as you can see, this stanza consists of only one sentence. It begins here and it ends here at the period. Okay, so now let's go over the stanza now that we have all the speech parts broken up, and let's define everything and try to find out how everything is working together. Okay. The first thing I want to point out is that as a subordinating conjunction, adverb as I have gone alone there and with my treasures bold, when it's being used this way, as means two things occurred at the same time. Very similar to the word while. In other words, as I was doing one thing, this also happened. As I was walking down the street, I tripped and fell. As I was walking down the street, the bank was being robbed. So two things are occurring at the same time. Okay. This adverb clause is going to tell us what we were doing. And then the clause that it's linked to is going to be the main clause that's going to tell us what that enabled him to do. All right. So we already know that I, the pronoun, is the subject, speaker, of the writer of have gone. Have gone, as I said, this is called present perfect tense, meaning that it began in the past and it never completed. Now that makes sense because Forrest Fenn said that he was going to go there and die, right? So it's a trip that he went on and he never returned. Okay. Now, alone. Alone is an adverb that's modifying have gone. It's specifying how we went. We went without others, without help, exclusively. Okay. So this is saying that he went alone in there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he was alone when he got there. In other words, I could go out to dinner or to a movie alone, but when I get there, I'm no longer alone. Okay. Because this is modifying the verb phrase have gone. So it's telling us how he went. Now, in, the preposition means within the limits, within the bounds or area of. Okay. And then there is a noun. It's the object of the preposition. It means that place or point. So in there is a prepositional phrase acting as an adverb, modifying have gone, answering where we have gone. Now, this and is a coordinating conjunction that's joining this prepositional phrase and this prepositional phrase. All right. We know that because it's separated here and there's no comma over here. So think of these coordinating conjunctions as kind of like a balance scale. And the left and the right side are both equal. So he went in there, okay? Then we have the preposition with my treasures bold. Now the preposition with means by means of, using something. Like I hit the nail with my hammer, It means together. It means in the same place. It means among, I was with my friends. Those are the different kinds of meanings that it has as a preposition. Okay. So this is not saying that he traveled there twice. He's just saying that I have gone alone in there and with my treasures. Okay. That doesn't mean that he went two times. That means that as he went in there, he was using his treasures to do something. Okay. He was with his treasures. His treasures were also bold. This is modifying the word treasures, bold. The treasures were bold. It's not saying he boldly went there, but his treasures. Okay. And then bold, of course, means clear and distinct to the eye, conspicuous. It also means sheer or steep. But in other words, he went in there with his treasures, and his treasures were bold. They stood out. Okay. So, as I have gone alone in there and with my treasures bold is not a complete thought. It's a dependent clause. Okay. I can't just go up to you and say, as I have gone alone in there and with my treasures bold, you're going to say, well, okay, well, what did that enable you to do? Okay. So that's where the next part comes in. It enabled him to do two things. One, I could keep my secret where, and two, I can hit the riches new and old. Now, I want to point out here that this clause, okay, is broken up into two independent clauses joined by the conjunction and. That's why we have a comma here, okay? And if you look at the rhyme scheme in the poem, we got where and there, they rhyme, and then we got old and bold, they rhyme. So basically, this is telling us, in my opinion, that when he says, I have gone alone in there is where he keeps his secret where. It's tying back to that line. Okay, that's why he separated these two independent clauses out like that. So this dependent clause, think of it this way, is explaining what he did, the steps he took. And then these are explaining the two individual things. In other words, as I have gone alone in there, I could keep my secret where. And with this treasures bold, he's hinting of riches new and old. You see what I'm doing here? The hint of riches new and bold is right here, okay? Because treasures is bold. It's emboldened. It's conspicuous. He's emboldening it. He's making it stand out. So that is his hint of riches new and old, in my opinion. That's the way I would interpret this. But either way, it's clear that this is a dependent clause up here, and then down here we have two independent clauses that are separated with and. Okay, and basically that's how I interpret it. Riches, of course, is synonymous with treasures bold. Riches. What kind of treasures? New and old. This and is joining the two adjectives, and it's defining what kind of riches. Well, new and old. Now, I want to explain something about I can keep my secret where. Where is this is what he's keeping secret. In other words, he's keeping the location secret. Okay. So it's my secret where. Okay. So where, of course, is what place is he keeping it? Because the word where means a place in which something is located or occurs. That's what where means. Well, where it's located and occurred is in there, because that's where he just said, as I have gone alone in there. So that's got to be where he's keeping a secret, in there, right? Seems really straightforward. Remember, there's no subterfuge in the poem. We should read it exactly as he wrote it, and we should have a clear understanding of what he's trying to say here. Now, again, this isn't a solution. I'm not going to try to break this down any further. I'm just giving you the grammatical functions. What exactly is he saying here? Okay. So to me, this stanza is telling us what the speaker did and what that enabled him to do at the same exact time. In other words, the stanza is defining the steps he took up here, okay, and the same ones that he wants you to follow in the next stanza. That's as simple as this is, okay? So this entire stanza becomes very important because, in my opinion, that is what it means in the next sentence. And a lot of you people have said that it is the quest. And that would be true, because if you look at it this way, this is what he did, okay? Our quest is to find the treasure. So we're going to go where he did. We're going to follow in his footsteps. So it makes sense that it is the quest. But what is the quest? The quest is to find out where this is, follow in his footsteps, and find the chest. That's what the quest is. So let's go on to the next stanza now. I don't really think I need to say any more about this one, but it's a very important stanza. Don't gloss over it. We know that there are no clues in the stanza, but remember that the first clue has a pronoun it in it. And it normally stands for something that you should already know, something that was previously told to you. So the only thing you previously told us is what you're looking at right here. So grammatically, it makes sense that this is it, right? And remember, this is why I'm talking about context. You have to keep everything in mind of what he's trying to say here. That's how I was able to connect where to there, because he's explaining it here. This seems very clear, and grammatically there are no faults in this at all. If you follow it the way he wrote it, it just so happens to be also grammatically correct, rule wise. He didn't break any rules. He didn't bend anything here. Very straightforward. Dependent clause linked to an independent clause, and it's got the punctuation to indicate that that's what he did. And then down here, the independent clause is actually formed by two independent clause because he's doing two different things, and it's linked by the conjunction and. Now, I didn't explain this to you before, but whenever you have one independent clause linked with another independent clause, because these both stand alone, I could say, I can keep my secret where, and that's a full sentence. I can also say, I can hint the rich is new and old. That's a full sentence. So when you're joining independent clauses with the coordinated conjunction and, the rule is that you have to have a comma before the end. That's the rule. And he obeyed it here. We don't have a run-on sentence. He did the right thing. So everything appears to indicate exactly what I'm telling you. So let's move on to stanza 2 now. Now we're on the second stanza. Let's continue. And here, again, anything that's within a square rectangle is going to be a main verb. Anything that's underlined is a verb, but it's being used as a different type of speech in this sentence or in this poem. So we have the verbs begin, halt, take, and then we have a verbal phrase down here, put in. I'll describe walk later when we get to the end of this stanza. So now we're going to find the subjects of the verbs, and then we're going to find the nouns again and the pronouns. So for the word begin, who is performing to begin? Well, to begin, the subject is actually hidden. This is called an imperative. It's a command. The speaker is speaking to you. He's telling you to begin it. Just like if I said if I looked at you and I said begin or run, the implied subject is you. So I put it in parentheses. You are the subject for this verb. Now, the subject for halt is warm waters. What's halting? The warm waters are halting. And then the subject for take is also warm waters. And I'll explain that a bit later. Put in is another imperative. The subject is you. He's telling you to put in. Okay. Now, he's only basically giving you two commands here. He's telling you to begin it, and he's telling you to put in. And again, I'll explain that in a little bit more detail very shortly. Now, for the nouns, we have canyon, we have home, and then we have brown. And again, I'm going to get to these a little bit later as we go on. We have two pronouns, it and it. And in both of these cases, they are working as direct objects. Begin what? Well, we're going to begin it. Take what? It is going to be taken. Now the determiners. We got the first one here is the. The what? The canyon. Specific canyon. Again. The next determiner we got is down here. Which home? The home. Adjectives. I underlined them in yellow. Warm. That's describing the waters. Down. That's describing the direction we're going to go in the canyon. And that is the last adjective. Prepositional phrases. First one we have is in. In the canyon. Canyon is the object of the preposition. We got in and canyon. That is a prepositional phrase. The next prepositional phrase we got is interesting because it's a combination of two of them back to back. And that's pretty common in English language. The first one is below the home. Home is the object of the preposition below. And then we got brown. Brown is the object of the preposition of. But together they're forming a single compound prepositional phrase that's going to work as one unit. But within that big prepositional phrase, the second prepositional phrase is going to apply to the one before it. In other words, below the home. And then of Brown is further describing home in this case. Now, for adverbs, we got two adverb phrases, not far and too far. Now, technically, the not adverb is modifying far. It's specifying it's not far. In other words, it's near. But together, these are working as a single phrase, not far. And then we have another one over here saying too far. Same thing. The adverb to is modifying far. It's too far. Now we're finally at the conjunctions again. And where is being used as a subordinate conjunction here. And it's going to create a dependent clause, as you'll see real soon now. Then we have and. And is joining compound verbs, halt and take. We know this because there's no comma here, right? So the warm waters, that's why the warm waters is subject for take. Whenever you have compound verbs without a comma there, the subject is being shared between both of those verbs. So the warm waters are halting, and then the warm waters are what's taking it in the canyon down. And he emphasizes that down here because he's telling you to put in below the home of Brown. Okay? So he's basically defining this area up here as the home of Brown. And he's saying it's too far to walk to. So we're not going to go down in the canyon. Instead, we're going to put it in below the home of Brown. Then we have another conjunction here, but. But is simply joining these two adverb phrases. Not far, but too far. It's showing contrast between the two. Okay, this one I'm going to spend a little bit of time on because I want to make sure that you understand one particular aspect about this that everybody seems to overlook. And I've been talking about this since 2015. I was talking about it on Dow's website. It led to so many arguments that Dow banned me from the board. But it is factually true what I'm about to tell you. And you can bring it to anybody that knows about grammar, and they're going to agree with me. And I don't know why everybody else doesn't. Okay. So anyway, let's get on. Okay, so we got beginning where warm water salt and taking it going down not far, but too far to walk. That's the first sentence that we're going to analyze here. So right off the bat, we got begin it, and then we got where. Okay. And I told you that where is a subordinating conjunction that's joining a clause to a dependent clause to an independent clause. This is your independent clause right here. That is the main clause of that sentence. It's an imperative. He's telling you to begin it. Just like I say, you jump in the pool. You go there and do this. You run. Okay, I don't need to keep saying you because I'm looking at you and I'm saying run, jump, begin. That's an imperative. Okay, it has a hidden subject, you, but it stands on its own. That's a complete thought. You begin it. That's done. Begin it. That's an independent clause. Now, the dependent clause is all of this. And it's all formed by the subordinate conjunction where. And basically, this whole thing is working as an adverb that's modifying begin. It's telling you where to begin it. Okay? We're going to begin it. Where are we going to begin it? Well, we're going to begin it where warm water salt and taken in the canyon down, not far, but too far to walk. Notice there's no comma here. And like I said, these are compound verbs that are sharing the same subject, warm waters. Now, where would such a case be? Well, let's say, for example, just to use a general example, the kitchen sink. Okay. When I pour water, warm waters into the kitchen sink, they're going to halt in the basin. And then eventually they're going to go through the drain and the sink's going to take it not in the canyon down, but in the sewer. And the sewer is not far. Matter of fact, I got, it's right out in the street here. So it's not far, but it's too far for me to walk. I'm not going to jump in the sink and go down through the pipes and get out into the street. It's too far to walk. Okay. That's basically what that first sentence is telling you. He's telling you where you're going to begin. And he's describing that. But remember that these places he's describing do not exist on the map. He told us that if you know, begin at where warm water salt is the first clue. And you also know that it's somewhere north of Santa Fe in the Rocky Mountains. Those things are not enough for you to know where warm water salt is. So, in other words, it's not enough for you to figure out where you're going to begin. So, you can't go to a map. For now, we're working on the poem. So, the only places warm water salt is right here. Okay. Where's the canyon? The canyon is down. All right. And ultimately, it's going to be down below here. Okay. So, we're going to take it down here. Right. Down here is where the canyon is. That's obvious by just reading this. Not far, but too far to walk. Put in below the home of ground. So that next sentence is where he's telling you to put in. So to walk is an infinitive, and it's playing two roles here. Okay, it's working as an adverb, modifying. This is an adverb, an infinitive working as an adverb, modifying too far. How far is it? It's too far to walk. And an infinitive to, a to infinitive, means in order to. So, in other words, the way to read that would be too far in order to walk. So, essentially, this means that if you were here, don't even bother going down there because it's too far to walk. Now, you can assume what you want from that. I assume it means you're going to have to take an alternate means of transportation, such as a car. And you're going to drive that car down below the home of Brown, and then you're going to put in, and that's where you're going to walk. So what I mean by not reading this properly is a lot of people are saying that their sob begins at this place because they think that warm water salt's there. And that could be anywhere. It could be Six Canyon, whatever, right? And then they immediately say, then I go down the canyon. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Right there, stop. This poem is not telling you to take it in the canyon down. At any point in time, it's not. As a matter of fact, if you research what Forrest Fenn said, at one point he said you're not going to find a 79 or 80-year-old man going down into any canyon. Those are his words, not mine. Right? So that was a hint, in my opinion. But the grammar right here, if you read it, the way he wrote it, is saying that the warm waters are going to halt and take. You're not going to go there. This whole clause is just telling you where to begin. Okay, this clause is modifying begin as an adverb. It's functioning as an adverb in that sense. And he's only got two commands. He's telling you begin, and then he's telling you put in. And the reason why is because it's not far, meaning it's near. So this adverb phrase, if it's not far, then it's got to be near, right? But then the show contrast, say, but it is too far to walk. That's all he's saying. This is very straightforward. Okay. So you shouldn't be going down the canyon. You're going to be looking, in the poem first. Like I said, don't try to figure out any of the clues until you've worked through the whole poem. That's the biggest mistake that I think people make because they got gold fever. They look at the poem and they try to take shortcuts and they're like, well, this looks simple to me. All I got to do is find a place where warm water salt that's next to a canyon. And then I go down the canyon and I look for something that's the home of Brown, but that's not what he's telling you to do. Okay. He told you that you need all the ingredients in order to build the cake. Right. So, again, we have warm waters halting and taking. It. Now remember, it is a pronoun, meaning that it means that as a pronoun, that's something that we should know at this point. Okay. It's taking the place of a noun. Well, the whole clause above it, or the whole stanza, in my opinion, is what it's referring to. Because that was the last thing he talked about before we got down here. And he's already telling you to begin it. And a lot of people gloss over that and say, well, it is a quest. And technically, they're right. But really, what you're supposed to be doing is following the steps he took in the first stanza. And he's taking you through the steps here. It, everywhere you see it, right? So basically, that's what this stanza is trying to tell you right here. He's telling you, he's describing where you're going to begin, and then he's telling you, just put in below the Homer Brown. Below the Homer Brown. You hear how I'm saying that? Below the Homer Brown. In other words, everything I've just got done telling you, that's the Homer Brown, okay? All of this stuff is within the Homer Brown. We know he went in the canyon, within the bounds of it, which means that he never left it. Because remember, the story from the previous stanza is that he went in there and he never returned. And he doesn't specify an exact distance in here, okay? He never says he left the canyon, is my point. So we're still going down. So somewhere, either in the middle or at close to one of the ends, is where we're leaving off, okay? That's where the Homer Brown ends. And he's telling you to put him below all of that. So you can also assume that this is at a high elevation. And it's going down in the canyon, okay? But you can't go down there. And he doesn't specify exactly why. He's just telling you to avoid the area and just go where you could put in, which is going to be below the area that he's talking about up here. So your Homer Brown should be right where warm water salt. That should all be in the same area. The canyon or the mouth of the canyon, the warm waters, all of that stuff should be within your Homer Brown. You're not going to the Homer Brown. You're putting in below it. Somebody once asked for us at one time, they said, I suppose the Homer Brown is a clue too. Could you tell me where the Homer Brown or whose home that is? And Forrest's response to her was, if I told you that, you'd walk right to the chest. So right there is telling you that where you put in, you should be at a place where you're going to be walking from. You're not going down the canyon. That's the biggest thing that I can stress to you about this stanza. Now, again, remember what we've learned so far, because we're trying to keep a running tally of what's going on in the poem. Because ultimately, after you've done this evaluation, you got to read the poem again and see and locate the clues and solve them, okay? And at that point, you're going to do what the clues are telling you to do, but you're going to do them within the poem and in your imagination, because that's where he told you to solve the poem, in your imagination. Once you've done all of that, you should know where warm waters halt, and you're going to go there, and then all the other clues are going to fall into place. That's the way he described this is working. So let's go on to the next stanza now. Now let's move on to stanza 3. First verb that we have is. This contraction is made up of the words it is. So is our verb here. Second one we have is again. This time it's not contracted. Is. And then the third one is will be. In other words, there is a contraction. This is a contraction of there will. So will be is a verbal phrase. So now let's find the subjects and the other nouns and pronouns. This is a to be verb, is, okay? So what are we talking about here? What is the subject of that verb? Well, it's clearly the pronoun it, because it's saying it is, and then it's telling us what it is, and essentially it's no place for it to meet. What is the subject for the second one? Now, I kind of forgot to do the fact that this is a determiner here, but basically, end is the subject. The end is the one that it's talking about here. The next one, and this one I'm going to explain just briefly, is called an existential there. This is the subject. The word there is a subject for will be, but he's not talking about a place here. An existential there is what they call a dummy subject. For example, it's telling you that something is going to exist or something exists. In other words, I could say there is a God. I don't mean there is God and I'm pointing at him. I'm saying that there is. I'm just making a statement that says that it exists. So he's telling us here that something is going to exist in our future. Basically, we're going to be going up the creek, right? So that's going to be in our future. Now, for nouns, we have is no place. Place is a noun, but it's not being used as a noun. And I'll get to that really soon. Now we have meek. Meek is definitely a noun. So drawing is a noun. And then paddle is a noun. Creek and loads and water. Those are the nouns and the subjects. The determiners. And again, I forgot to underline the one over here. So the first one we have up here is kind of working as a negate operator. And it's saying that there is no place, okay, for, and then we have another determiner, the meek, okay? And I didn't underline it, but of course, the is specified, it's a determiner for n. Which n? The n, okay? And then we have no down here again, doing the same thing. It's no place. Down here, it's no paddle. And then we have your, who's Greek? Your Greek. And that's it for the determiners. Adjectives. We got nigh, and then we got heavy, and then we got high. Prepositional phrases. Okay, this sentence starts with one, which is actually kind of unusual, but it's starting with a prepositional phrase. From is being used as a preposition, and the object of the preposition is there. From there. From where? From there. And then we got for preposition. For whom? For the meek. And then we got up. That's another preposition. Up where? Up the creek. Your creek. We only got one adverb here, ever. Now for conjunctions, we only have one. And it's obviously joining these two noun phrases, heavy loads and water high. Okay. Now, this sentence here, briefly, is operating essentially as a bunch of adjective phrases to describe where you came from and where you're going to. Okay, again, let's do stanza 3 now. Now remember, I'm going to use that word context again, okay? Because the first thing we're starting out with is a prepositional phrase that says from there. Now, from means away from the point that we currently are. In other words, away from there. Now, there is referring back to where what he just told us. So he just told us to put in below the Homer Brown. And then he's saying from there. So, in other words, from the point of view, as if you were standing at the place that you put in and looking back. Okay. Now, this here is kind of working almost like a list of adjectives. Okay. He's using multiple clauses to describe things with adjectives. The whole clauses are operating as adjectives. All right. So from there, okay, is actually working as an adverb. Is actually working as an adverb, modifying is. Okay. Because it's specifying from there, from where we are. Okay. And then he's saying it, which is the subject, it. Now remember it again. In my opinion, this is the same it that we've been using. It's not a dummy subject. It's a pronoun. Now remember, this is the third time we've seen it, okay? And we're performing actions in the poem since we hit stanza 2. Just keep that in mind. This is not a solution, so I'm not going to explain in detail. But now that we're standing here and looking back, okay, look at it this way. These are not separate clauses, they're phrases. But let's divide that off for a minute, okay? He's saying from there. Now remember, from below Homer Brown. It is no place. It's not a place for the meek, okay? So let's think about that for a minute. So now means, again, in or at that place or position recently mentioned. And for us, so from there, recently mentioned was the Homer Brown, okay? So from there is a preposition, again, working as an adverb, modifying is, specifying where, right? Note, the next lines are basically just a list of adjective clauses. They're providing descriptions of where we came from and where we're going to. And you can tell that by the tenses, okay? He's saying that it is no place for the meek. There, from there, it is no place for the meek. So he's actually referring to the next line here, in my opinion. No place for the meek would obviously be the end, right? So the end is ever drawing nigh. Then he's got a semicolon here. A semicolon, let's forget that it's a semicolon for now. You could have a period here because this is the end of a sentence, right? He didn't put a period there because the semicolon means that what we were about to read next is related to what we just read. Okay? They're related. There's a strong relationship between the two of them. So these two lines, or technically there's only one thing here, it's just spread out over two lines. But this is related to what we just read above. You could kind of think of this as like a crossroads. In other words, here's where you came from, and here's where you're going to be going to. And again, because this is the present tense, okay? But he's saying there will be. Now, this is not talking about a location. This is a location here, but this one is not. It's a dummy subject. It's just telling us that something's going to exist. It's existential. There will be, in other words, in our future, no paddle, okay? So, no is determiner, okay? And it means none at all, not any. And it also negates the following word. Place. A place is an area with a definite or indefinite boundaries, a portion of space. So no place, it means to not be suitable or right in a particular situation, okay? That's exactly what it means. So no place means that it's not suitable for the meek. That's basically what it means here, okay? For the meek. Okay, so this is working as an adjective modifying place. And so is the determiner. It's negating it. It's no place. It's saying it's no place. A place for what? For the meek. It's not a place for the meek. Okay, sounds straightforward. I'm not bending anything here. That's how everything is working together. But you got to look at really closely at the nouns and the pronouns that he's using here and determine what they mean and keep track of that. You know, don't just read off the top of your head and say, from there, it is no place. Well, where is there? You should be asking these things. What is it? Okay. And remember, the determiner again, the meek, it's a very specific thing. So think about that here for a minute. We're standing here outside the home of Brown, all right? But we're looking back, okay? So he's saying from there, meaning the home of Brown, where we currently are, when we look back, he's further describing where we came from, okay? So he's saying that that place that we just came from is no place for the meek, right? So if it's no place for the meek, is it a place for the brave? Those are things to think about, you know, right? So the very next line, there was no place for the meek, the end is ever drawing nigh. That is a whole nother independent clause working as an adjective. The whole entire clause is working as an adjective. That's why he has the commas there. He's got a list of adjectives, essentially. Put the comma there for the semicolon, the comma there for clarity. So these things, the end is ever drawing nigh, and for the meek, are describing the place we came from. And these two lines are describing what's going to be in our future or where we're going to. Now, where we're going to is there will be no paddle, okay? Same thing again. No is working just like it did up here, okay? There is no paddle. And what he means by that, the noun, paddle is a noun, okay? So that's the act of paddling a boat or a canoe. It's the act of moving a boat or a canoe by means of using a paddle. It's also an act or period of walking in shallow water. So basically, we are not going to be walking in the creek at this time. We're still probably going to be driving until we get to the point that we could walk from. He's just mentioning an intersection that's going to be below the Homer Brown. Now you can extrapolate the fact that since we were up at a higher elevation, and the warm waters halted and took it down in the canyon. He told us to put in below that, but now we're going back up a creek. So he's telling us that we're going to be going upstream. So to me, that's meaning that he's sending you back up into the canyon from below. Now, he doesn't tell you why he's doing that, but that's why he didn't specify an exact distance. He said it's not far, but too far to walk. In other words, so get to a position where you could walk from. And the only way you're going to do that is by putting him below the Homer Brown, right? So he's describing where you're going to turn off that road, and he's going to say where you came from to give you hints back to the Homer Brown again, and where you're going to be going to. And you're definitely going to be going upstream at this point, okay? Now he says your creek, okay? So that is implying that it's the same thing that we were following downstream from where warm waters halt. It was a creek that begins at warm waters halt, okay? It is the vessel or the route or the means of transportation that the warm waters are using in order to take or convey it into the canyon down, okay? But we're not going in the water. We're going to go all the way around it, go down below, and come back up. That's exactly what he's telling you here to do. And then he's telling you that ultimately, the only thing you're going to have, because that's what just means, okay? Just means only at this or that moment, now or soon from now. Now or soon from now, okay? Heavy, large in weight or quantity, sharply inclined, steep, heavy grade, more or worse than usual in amount, or higher degree. For example, heavy traffic today, heavy rain, right? Loads, a great number of or amount. The forces to which an object is subjected due to superimposed weight on the vertical surfaces. I don't know why I have that in here. That is one of the meanings of loads, though. Okay. And then, of course, water. You know what water is. High. High means extending upward, high in elevation. Okay. So it could be a waterfall. It could be a lake that's up higher or a pool of water. We don't know. But we do know that it's up high. There's going to be a drop, a change in elevation. Okay. Because when we're below the ground, the water that we came from is going to be up higher. Okay. And a substantial amount higher, I should probably add. He's not talking about like a 50, 60 foot in elevation because he wouldn't be using terms like this. Okay. And it wouldn't be too far to walk. Right. So there's got to be some other reason why we can't walk to that spot. And instead, he's having us drive all the way around, put in below it, and then travel back up it. But basically, that's the gist of this stanza. That's how the stanza is working. And I like to think of it, like I said, remember the semicolon. Everything before the semicolon is describing where we came from. Everything after the semicolon is describing what we're going to see in the area he wants us to go. And I like to think of this or mention it as like an intersection or a crossroads. Okay. He's saying whatever you took to get down from where warm waters halt, when you get to this point, okay, when you get to this point that you need to turn off, this is going to be a hint to where you're turning off. You're going to be heading to a place that has heavy loads and water high, and you're going to be going up. You're not going to be going down. And again, we already know that from before. We're not going to be walking down a canyon. I proved that. You're not going to walk from where warm waters halt into the canyon. Nor, you know, he's telling you to put in below all of it. He's telling you to put in below the Homer Brown. So there's something preventing you from going to that point from where warm waters halt. We don't know what it is, but so let's go to the next stanza. Okay, now this is stanza 4. Verb phrases. First one. Here's we have a contraction of you have. So the verb is have been. It's a verbal phrase again. Have been. Second verb is found. Third verb, look. Now, the next one is tarry, and then take and go. Now, cease is underlined because it's a verb, but I'll get to that in a minute. It's actually a to plus infinitive form, which means it's not working as a verb. It's working as a different form of speech in this sentence. Okay, subjects. Who's been wise? You. You is the subject here. You. And that's another pronoun. Now, I want to explain again that we have compound verbs here. You have been wise and found. Wise, have been, and found are this and conjunction, this coordinating conjunction and is joining both of those verbs. So this found actually has the same subject, you. If you have been wise and you, which it don't mention here, have found the blaze. That's the way that works. So you is the subject for both of these. For look, it's an imperative again. Subject is you just don't see it, right? Because he's giving you a command, look quickly down. For tarry, who is he telling to tarry? You. You, again, this is another imperative, giving you an order here. Same thing with take and go, okay? You're the one that's taking, and you're the one that's going, and we have compound verbs, again, in this part. Now, for the nouns, we have blaze, we have quest. This is a noun phrase, marvel gaze. This the word chest, and then peace. Determiners, we got thee, which blaze, the blaze. Your, whose quest, your quest. Which chest, the chest, another determiner. Adjectives, we got wise. Now just remember, this is a to be verb again. It's not an action verb. It's showing a state, basically saying that you are equal to wise if you have been wise. So it's working as an adjective describing the subject there. It's a subject complement, okay? Then we got the same down here, except that this adjective again, he's telling you to tarry for a short amount of time. Prepositions. First one, with. With is a preposition. Marvel gaze is the object, with marvel gaze. Prepositional phrase there. Next prepositional phrase in here is in. We got in where? In peace. Peace is the object of the preposition. Adverbs. We got a adverb phrase here, quickly down. Quickly is modifying down, and quickly down, all both together is telling us where and how to look. It's describing how to look. So it's modifying the verb. And pretty much that's it. Oh, wait. We got just. Just is another adverb here. And that, of course, is modifying take, telling us to take just the chest and go in peace. Just take the chest and go in peace. Conjunctions. First one, if. This is a conditional. This is a subordinating conjunction again, leading off a dependent clause. And then we got and. And like I said before, and is joining these compound verbs that share the same subject, you. If you have been wise and you found blaze. And then we got but, okay? This is showing contrast. Your question could cease, but tarry scant with marble gaze. And then we got and. And again down here is joining these two. And I forgot to put the parentheses you up here, but you should already know it because whenever you got a compound verb, they're going to share the same subject. So the subject for go is you. You take, you go. So this subordinating conjunction is beginning a dependent clause. Now that dependent clause is actually a condition. He's setting up a condition. And the condition is that you have been wise and have found the blaze. Okay. So this is specifying a condition. It's a dependent clause. And this conjunction is joining, again, compound verbs have been and found. Have been, have found. Okay? There's no comma here. So it's have been and have found. Sharing the same subject, you. So both of these have to be true. This, again, this is a to be verb. This is a subject complement. If you were equal to wise, you could basically say. So you equal wise, were equal because of the tense, right? Or have been up to this point wise, okay? And you have found what? Found the blaze. This is a direct object, okay? Because this is a transitive verb, which requires a direct object, right? So you have been wise, okay? Subject complement, and this is a direct object. If you have been wise and found the blaze. So wise means to become aware and informed, having inside information, knowing, wise to something, able to make sensible decisions and give good advice because of the experience and knowledge that you've gained up to this point. That's what it means to be wise. Okay. So what about found? What does found mean? Found, okay, means to establish, to have located something. Have found, again, is present perfect tense, meaning that you found it sometime in the past, and you, of course, it's still true now that you found it. Okay. A blaze. Blaze is a brilliant, striking display, a mark or a marker to indicate a trail. Okay. And here's an idiom with blaze, a trailblazer, of course, to be the first in order to discover something that others follow. Okay. That's what a trailblazer is. First person to discover a trail and mark it and go forth and mark that trail. So we're looking, but it could be something that's brightly lit, a fire, something in the sky. Um, you know, because we're looking quickly down, we could assume that it's up high, right? Because if you've been wise and found the blaze, his next line is telling us to look quickly down, your quest to cease. That is an independent clause right there. So this dependent clause is tied to this independent clause, right? And it's got a comma after the word blaze. So it's proper for that. The reason for the comma here is because he's giving you a request, and then the result are the results of that request. So look quickly down. To me, quickly down means to look down something. Like if you're checking a 2x4 at the lumberyard, see if it's warped, right? You're going to look quickly down it. Okay. But it can also mean look down fast, which means that maybe you're looking at something that's at a high elevation that moves. What could that be? Maybe the sun. I don't know. Could be a light. Could be something else, right? So I'm not trying to solve the clues here. That's up to you, but I'm telling you what it means grammatically. So when you do that, okay, your quest to cease. So he's telling you now this to cease again, cease is a verb, but it's not being used as a verb. This is an infinitive. Okay. This time it's acting as an adverb. As an adjective modifying quest. So we're going to look at the quest to cease, your quest to cease, right? So since we're reading the poem, the only way the quest can cease is by reading it to the end. But later on, remember that this can have a different meaning when your boot's on the ground. Just remember that when you're solving the poem. Remember that this is not a verb telling you to cease. It's telling you that your poem is going to cease when you look quickly down. Okay, your quest, I should say, not your poem. So it's telling you that your quest is going to cease when you look quickly down. Now remember, what if quest is equal to it? And it is equal to the first stanza. In other words, what he's saying is when you found the blaze, you're standing at the point that he wanted to send you to, right? So that's the first part of this, okay? However, he's got another comma and he's got a coordinating conjunction to show contrast. He's using but. Now, tarry scant with marble gaze. Marble gaze is a noun phrase, right? What this seems to me is he's either telling you to spend a short amount of time there and look for something so that you make sure you don't miss it. Okay. No, I understand at one point he said that tarry scant means get the hell out of there, but he's not going to, he doesn't have to tell you in the poem to take the chest and go and do it fast and get out. No, he's not going to waste all that time in the poem. That's not what this means. He's showing contrast. So, in other words, this is tied back to your quest to cease, meaning that there may be one more thing that you need to do when you reach that place. And that would be to go to a place where you could tarry scant. In other words, stay for a certain amount of time with or among a marble gaze. Okay. Remember when I said in one of my other videos, or my Saab video, a room with a view. I request a room with a view. That's almost what he's saying here. Okay. And then after you've done that, he's got a comma, and then he ends it up with another independent clause saying, just take the chest and go in peace. Okay. So he's telling you to take and go. And is joining take and go, the two verbs. Okay. So you can take the chest and go in peace. Okay. You're the subject for take. And you're the subject for go. Okay. Because of that's the way it works in grammar. That's the way we've been doing it up to this point. We're going to stay consistent here. And by the way, take just incidentally means to convey, control, or cause to go along to another place, to provide a path or a way for. Remember that when you're looking at take it in the canyon down and when you're looking at take the chest here. Okay. It can mean, or not it can, it does mean to convey or control or cause to go along to another place. The subject is going to be taking it. So if it is the subject or it is the warm waters, it is conveying or causing something to go to another place. It's providing a path or a way for, which is exactly what the creek would do, because the canyon is providing a way for the creek to flow downward. Now here we are in stanza 5. Stanza 5, what verbs do we have? First one is. Second one, verbal phrase, must go. Third one, leave. The final one, or the final two are have done, is a contraction of I have. So have done and am, contraction of I am, which this is another to be verb, okay? I have no underlined as a verb, and it is acting as a main verb in that sentence, okay? And I want to explain this a little bit more clear at the end of the video on this stanza, because this stanza is actually really interesting of what he did, and I want to explain that to you. That's why I only have it underlined. Up here, of course, we have the to infinitive. To what? To seek. This, as a unit, is not acting as a verb. It's only a verb within itself, like to seek. So in other words, I can modify this with an adverb. And the modification takes place within the infinitive itself. It doesn't go outside of it. Because outside of to seek, it's behaving as a different part of speech. That's not the case with no. No should have a square box around it. But I left that like that so that I know what I need to talk about to you at the end of the stanza. And now the subjects. All right, why is it? Why? Why is the subject of this? Subject for must go is I, the pronoun I. I must go. Who's the subject for leave? Remember, we have an and joining must go and leave. So I is the subject for leave. I must go and I must leave. Remember, seek is not being used as a verb here, so it's not going to have a subject. No is being used as a verb, and it is going to have a subject, and that subject is I. The answers are actually going to be direct objects, and you'll see that soon. Now, who has done it? Who have done it? I, pronoun I. Okay. Now you'll notice that there's a comma here, and over here we have the same subject. I am. I am. Okay. He didn't eliminate the comma and say I have done it tired, and now I am weak. He could have left out the I and just put the word am here, but he didn't do that, and I'm going to explain why in a minute. And for the nouns, we have it is a pronoun, and it's there is no direct object with a to be verb. This is going to work as a subject complement. It's saying why is it. Now remember, you could change is with an equal sign because that's what it means. Why is it? Just by reading it, you tell. Right? So it is a subject complement. It and why are both equal. True, another noun. All, a pronoun. Okay. Answers. That's what you already know, right? The answers. Answers. It. And again, this time it is a direct object. I have done it. Tired. Now I am weak. Am again is a to be verb. So weak is referring back to I. I equals weak. I am weak. Okay. This again is a subject complement here. Determiners. Okay. My trove. My is a determiner. The for the answers. What answers? The answers. And that's pretty much it for determiners. Adjectives. Well, we got tired, weak. Tired and weak are the only two objects. Prepositions. Okay. First one. For. For whom? Object of preposition. Pronoun all. For who? For all. That's a prepositional phrase. And that's the only prepositional phrase that we have in this stanza. Also, I want to point out again that just like stanza 2, this stanza has two sentences. It's got one sentence and two sentences. All right, so for adverbs, the first one we got is so. Second adverb that we got is already. Yeah, so this so is working with the verb is. This already is working with the verb no. And then we got now that's working with the verb am. Conjunctions. All right. We have a subordinating conjunction being used here. That. That is being used as a subordinating conjunction in this clause. And we have and, a coordinating conjunction. Again, joining compound verbs, must go and leave, sharing the same subject, which is I. And we got one more and down here. And basically, this one is joining two independent clauses. So here, the first thing we have is so, and so is an adverb. And so is basically being used to modify is in this case. Okay. And what it means is it's being used as a discourse marker, which roughly means thus, therefore, as a result. It's preface, used to preface a remark. It's used to refer back to something that has already been mentioned. Okay. So that's a clue down here where he's saying the answers we already know. So he's referring back to something that he already mentioned. Okay. And that's going to make sense in a moment. Okay. So why is it? Okay. So why is the subject and it, again, here's it, right? So it is a pronoun and it's being used as a subject complement. So it is referring back to why. Now, if this wasn't a question, and you wanted to convert it into a statement, you have basically reversed these two things. So instead of saying why is it, it would say it is why. All right. And I want to tell you right now, just right off the bat, that this is an independent clause. Okay. So why is it? I can go up to somebody and say, so why is it? I'm asking you, so why is it? Okay. And then I'm going to add what we have here is a dependent clause. That is another subordinating conjunction, the way it's used here. Okay, remember, these are clauses because they have a noun and a main verb. This one, there's no comma after the word go. So again, we have compound verbs. I must go, I must leave. All right. So we have and joining the two verbs. So what this means now, it is being used as, like I said, a subject complement. So it is why that I must go. In other words, the answer to this clause would become it. And since this is a question, he's saying, so why is it? All right, he's referring to something that he just said to you. So why is it? Okay. And then, of course, we have that I must go and leave my trove to all to seek. That is what he's answering. That is what he's asking you to answer. Why is it? He's asking you, why is it that I must go and leave my trove for all to seek? Okay. So must go means that he's obligated to do something. Not that he might go, okay? That I must go and leave my trove. It's used to express a meaning or declaration. Also, a declaration as a declarative content clause or a that complement clause, right? So must go means obligated to do something. Go, to move or travel from one place to another. Must go is present tense. He's obligated to. It's necessary that something is done. Okay. And of course, and is joining go and leave. And what is he leaving? He's leaving my trove. My trove. A trove is a collection of valuable items discovered or found. Okay. Then we have the prepositional phrase for all. And then we have an infinitive here again. Okay. And this one is acting as an adjective, modifying all. For all to what? To seek. To seek. It's not acting as a verb. Okay. For all to seek. So he's leaving the trove for all. Seek. All is a pronoun. Okay. And all basically means everyone. For everyone to seek. Makes sense, right? I believe too that this is a rhetorical question. And the reason why I'm saying it's a rhetorical question is that not because it's asking you a yes or no question. He's asking you a question that he's not expecting an answer because he gives you the answers down here. Okay. Now, this second clause is going to be a pretty cool one, right? The second clause here, okay, the second part, this whole entire thing is the independent clause. It's actually three independent clauses. All right. Up here, he's telling you the answers. Okay. The answers I already know. The answers are actually going to end up being a direct object because that's what he's telling you. He's providing the answers. I is a subject. I already know. Okay. No. Know means to feel certain about something, to have information in your mind as a result of experience or because you have learned or recently been told it. Okay. So the answers here that is providing based on what this said is referring to everything above. Okay. So this it is talking about the same it as up there and it's providing the answers. So this is interesting because this dependent clause, and then we have comma and, which is the proper way to join this independent clause. These two things are the answers that I already know. So these are acting like direct objects to the verb know. In other words, what do I already know? Well, I know I've done it tired and now I'm weak. Okay. So they're compound. Think of it that way as a compound direct object to know. And what are you knowing? Well, you're knowing the answers. All right. That is what he's telling you here. All right. So the answers are I have done it. And now we got it as another direct object again. So it's the same it that he's talking about up here, which is the same it as above it, and so on. And this tired is actually a complement to the direct object. I've done it tired. So it is acting like an adjective modifying it. He's not saying he was tired. He's saying it tired. I've done it tired. Like I beat the heck out of this car, and it's tired now. It would, if it was a car. So I've done it tired. It is tired, not him. That's not a subject complement. That's a complement to the direct object. Here he's saying, and now. Now is an adverb modifying am, because this is a contraction of I am. All right. So I am weak. Okay. This is a subject complement saying that I am weak. But this is an object complement going back to it. It is tired. So that's a hint to it being something that would be tired. Okay. It can also tie into but tarry scant with marvel gaze. Because if you're tired and weak, you're going to seek a place that you could take a short rest, right? A tarry scant. All right. So imagine that you're out sightseeing and you come across, let's say, a historical site or something that somebody would marvel gaze at. Okay. Now you've driven there, okay, and you've done it, okay. So you put in below on brown. You're tired. You're going to go to someplace that you would go when you're tired and weak. Because remember, all of this stuff is referring to stuff that we should already know. He tells us that right here. Okay. He already knows it. He's already told it to us. And this discourse marker up here is referring back to what he just said. So some quest made them tired and weak. Okay. I'm going to not mention the saw, but I'm going to mention another thing to you. When you go on a vision quest, okay, you do it for 3 or 4 days. Kind of like when he went out on his Lewis Clark adventure for a few days, okay? The first thing you do before you go on a quest is you fast, which means you didn't eat or drink, right? So when you're done with the quest, you're going to be tired and weak. Think about that. But again, I don't want to get into a solve. In any case, that's what he's talking about here. This is not saying he was tired. He's saying this is essentially is complementing it, which is the direct object. So whatever it is. Now remember, it is a pronoun, something that we previously know. Same thing up here. It. And here it is being used as a subject complement, but it is why. Okay. Why? Why is it that I must go? Okay. So that basically does this stanza. And again, so far up to this point, everything in the poem has been grammatically correct. He hasn't made any mistakes. So let's go on to the next stanza. The final stanza, finally, stanza 6. Again, this one is formed up of 2 sentences. Verb, first verb, hear. Second verb, listen. Third verb is a verb phrase, will be. Okay, future tense, will be. Fourth verb, are. Fifth verb, give. Okay, so first, let's work out the subjects. Well, this is an imperative again, and so is listen. He's telling you to hear and listen, right? And since we have compound verbs again, I technically didn't need to put you here because by now you should have that pounded in your head that the subject for both hear and listen is going to be you. It's implied. These are both imperatives. And furthermore, like I said, there's no comma after the word all. They are joined. So this is compound verb situation. They're going to share the same subject. So what about will be? What's the subject for will be? Effort. Effort will be. Okay. How about are? Who's the subject? Pronoun you. You are. Okay. And then give. Who's the subject for give? Who's doing the giving? I. Pronoun I. I give. Now for the nouns, we got me as the pronoun. Okay. Hear what? Hear me. So it's being used as a direct object here. Hear me. This should actually be in a square box. I didn't do that. This is the subject for will be. What will be? Effort will be worth the cold. Whose effort? Your effort. Okay. So effort, this should be in a square box. Effort is being the subject for will be. Okay. Cold, would, I already explained to you. And then we got you here again. This is actually an indirect object, you. He's giving a title to whom? He's giving it to you. So the direct object is the noun title. The indirect object is you. And then we got gold down here, which is a noun. Determiners. Your. Whose effort? Your effort will be worth the cold. The cold. The cold. Okay. The wood. Again, that's another one. The gold. I give you title to what? To the gold. The gold. Adjective. Now remember, this is again, and I'll explain that in a minute. This, not only do you have subject complements, you have object complements. This is basically a complement to the direct object, me. And it's telling you what part of me to listen to, all of me. Okay. That's the way that's going to work. And then the same thing over here. Good is being used, but this time it's a subject complement. I want you to listen good, right? It's not a direct object. It's an adjective telling you, basically describing how you're going to listen. We got a to be verb again, are. We got brave. This is a subject complement. Again, you equal brave. If you equal brave. And that's the end of the adjectives. Prepositional phrases. First one, worth. Worth what? Worth the cold. Cold, again, is the object of preposition. Second one, in. In what? In the wood. In wood. In what wood? In the wood. Okay. And then the last preposition, to. To what? To gold. Which gold? The gold. To the gold. Prepositional phrase. Conjunctions. Okay. First one, so. Now, in this case, so, unlike the previous stanza, based on the grammar being used here, this is working as a subordinating conjunction that's forming a dependent clause. This and is a coordinating conjunction joining compound verbs in that clause. So we got hear and listen. If is also a subordinating conjunction. All right, it's beginning another dependent clause. And then we got and basically this is joining brave and in the wood. And brave and in the wood are both working as a compound subject complement. Because in other words, he's telling you that you need to be both of these things. You understand? And I got one more thing to say about this. And it's kind of going to surprise you, or it's, going to make you mad. I don't know, but I'll get to it in a second. So let's wrap up this last stanza. Okay, so let's go over a couple of things here. The first thing is we have a subordinating conjunction here. That's how so is being used in this case. And what it's doing is it's defining a dependent clause right here. The independent clause, because we have two sentences here. First sentence ends here, the second sentence ends here. The independent clause is down here. Okay. This is a full sentence that will stand on its own. I could say, your effort will be worth the cold. Okay. This is an adverb clause, and it's telling us what you're going to have to do in order to take that effort. Okay. To make it worth the cold. So we have so, and then we have here, of course, and the subject of here is you. Okay. He's giving you a command. This is an imperative, and he's telling you to hear. Hear who? Well, hear me. This is the direct object. Okay. All basically means totality, everyone. Okay, or all of something, right? This is working as what they call an object complement. Okay. So it's an adjective, but it's working like it's working as a complement to the object. What part of me should you hear? Well, all of me. That's how that works. And listen here is intransitive. This adjective is basically telling the user, it's referring back to the you, which is the subject. It's telling the subject how to listen. Okay. This conjunction, once again, and we've seen this a lot in this poem, is joining both of these verbs, hear and listen. We have compound verbs again in this clause. Okay. So this clause is telling you, hear me, all of me. In other words, everything I've said up to this point, at least, and probably further on. And it's showing out. And while you're doing that, listen good, which means to comprehend or listen closely. You're not just hearing like you're listening to background music. He's telling you to listen and pay attention. Basically, what that is saying, right? Now, the subject for will be is effort. So I should have made this in a square box, like I said earlier, a square blue box, like I've been doing, but I messed up. So whose effort? Well, determiner your effort, the reader's effort will be worth the cold, right? So worth the cold here is acting like an adverb and it's modifying where will be. Now, since this is a to be form of a verb, this is again is acting as a subject complement. Okay, it's acting as an adjective. This prepositional phrase, and it's referring back to the subject, which is effort. In other words, if you do what he's saying up here, hear me all and listen good, then your effort will be worth the cold. Okay, so if we look at the meaning of some of those words, first of all, as you already know, listen means to pay attention to. Okay. Hear, of course, means to listen to what the person has said. Now, me is who you're supposed to listen to. It's the direct object. Hear me. Well, obviously, me is a reference to I because I is the speaker. Okay. So he's saying, listen to me, hear me, right? That's pretty much obvious in this stanza. Okay. So effort. An effort is a serious attempt to do something, right? Will be, of course, is simple future tense, meaning that if you do what I'm telling you to do, then in the future, okay, something worth the cold. Worth means of substantial or significant value or merit. Okay. Cold doesn't necessarily refer to temperature. Now, remember, in this here, even in the poem, it tells us that all to seek. I left my trove for all to seek. So it's kind of like we're playing hide and seek, right? He hid the chest, and we're trying to seek it out. And also, you can think of it like a detective when his leads go cold. Okay, he has no more leads. His trail went dead. His trail went cold. Okay, it also means not easy to find, cold. But in hide and seek, it means that you're far from the object of a search. Okay. And what he means by that is that when you got down to the poem, if you don't do what he's telling you to do here, okay, because now you've reached this part of the poem, you obviously don't have the treasure chest yet. So he's kind of telling you that there's you have to put some effort into this poem and essentially listen to what the poem is telling you, what I am telling you in the poem, okay, and then take the effort to do what it's telling you to do, okay. It will be worth the cold. In other words, you'll get a gain if you go back and don't just quit at this point, right? This seems pretty obvious. Now, this is the part that I want to get into a little bit. And I want to bring it up because this is the only place that Forrest Fenn has done something that breaks the grammar rules, okay? Now, if, again, we have a conditional clause here, if is a subordinating conjunction that's setting up a conditional clause. Now, the conditions are that you have to be brave and in the wood, right? So that's this dependent clause right here. Okay, it's a valid clause, but it's dependent. I can't just go up to somebody and say, if you are brave and in the wood. And they're going to wonder, okay, well, if I am brave in the wood, what's going to happen? Now, brave again is working as an adjective. And here we have another to be verb, which means that this is a subject complement. Okay. And it makes sense because he's asking you if you are brave. Okay. That means you equal brave. You are brave. But here, because of the conjunction, he's joining this prepositional phrase, which is also acting as a subject complement, to brave. So not only do you have to be brave, you also have to be in the wood. Okay. If you meet both of those conditions, then he's going to give you title of the gold, right? I is a subject. So the speaker's going to give, what's he going to give you? He's going to give you a title, all right? What kind of title? a title to the gold. This is working as an adjective, modifying title. What kind of title? Title to the gold, right? You is the indirect object. So you is the person, the recipient of his giving. So in other words, he's given you this direct object, and like I said, you're the recipient. So you're the indirect object. That's the way this works. Okay. The problem here is whenever you have a subordinate or dependent clause that precedes an independent clause, okay, it's supposed to have a comma at the end of the dependent clause. And there is no comma here. Forrest Fenn did not put a comma. This is an independent clause, stands on its own. I could tell somebody, I give you title to gold. Okay. And that stumped me for a while because this is the only place in the poem that Forrest Fenn did not follow that rule of having to place a comma after a dependent clause and before the dependent clause that it links up with. You could reverse the order to eliminate the comma. For example, if I said, I give you title to the gold if you are braving in the wood, I wouldn't need a comma anywhere because the main clause is appearing before the dependent clause. But whenever you have it the other way around, it's supposed to have a comma here. And it stumped me, and I tried to look at everything, and eventually I talked. This is actually what made me go to a lot of the grammar folks because I was really pounding my head on it. Like, why did he do it? Why did he do it? He said there's no subterfuge. Okay. So why did he do this? Why is he drawing attention to this line? What I thought. And after I talked to a couple of experts, either in colleges or also online that had big followings, the general consensus was this. You could sometimes leave that comma out if the context is clearly understood. There's nothing ambiguous, all right? And what they told me is if you read this, okay, if you are braving in the wood, it's pretty clear that what he's going to do is if you meet these conditions, he's going to give you a title to the gold. It just seems pretty clear by the context. The other thing they told me is that if you have very short sentences, okay, it's common a lot of times they'll leave that comma out. And that's what we have in this case too. And that is ultimately how I ended up resolving it for myself based on what I was told from the grammar experts. So I'm bringing this up because I told you that I would point out anywhere that Forrest broke the grammar rules. And this is the only place in the poem that he appears to have done that. And according to the grammarians that I talked to, who are supposedly quote unquote experts, what he did here is okay. It's okay. In especially in the poem, they told me if this were like a legal document or something, then it wouldn't be okay. But in this case, it's okay. So basically, that's it. That pretty much wraps up everything with this poem. I hope that everybody enjoyed. I put a lot of effort into this. I tried to make this as simple as possible and as generic as possible so that it'll work with any solve. I don't want to involve any other solve because then that would detract you. This should be usable on any solve. If you can't get your solve to work with the poem the way I'm reading it, then there's probably a 99% chance your solve is wrong because trust me, I'm sure I'm reading it right. From beginning to end, we went through all 6 stanzas, okay? And I double and triple checked and verified all of this stuff with anybody that was willing to respond to me, okay? Because that's the other odd thing. A lot of people weren't willing to respond. Why? I have no idea, but it's just really strange. It's like people are afraid of this poem, all right? But there you go. I hope that you guys enjoyed this, and I hope that it makes you see not only the poem, but everything you read in the future in a more clear light, because now your brain automatically, whether you realize it or not, while you're reading, you're going to try to break things up. Okay, this is a preposition phrase, direct object, indirect object. This is related to this. This is related to the previous paragraph, and you're going to get a better grasp of the story that you're reading. In this poem, it's extremely important that that's done. Okay, because all of these clues only exist in the poem and in your imagination until you solve the poem. That's what Forrest Fenn told us. That's what we did here. So I hope you guys enjoy it. I'm sorry for the length of this. I thought that it would be about 2 hours, and I was pretty close, maybe a little bit over. I'm going to leave chapter markers below in the description so that you're able to jump to each stanza so that you don't have to listen to the whole thing. But honestly, I think that you should listen to the whole thing first time, because it's not a good idea, to speed through this, because the whole point is to make sure that you comprehend it. Okay. And yeah, grammar tends to be boring, and going over the rules and showing this is kind of boring. But that's the reason why it took 10 years for the chess to be found. Everybody glossed over this. They didn't want to put forth the effort. Okay. And you just can't do that. So unless you're already a grammar expert, you know, I would pay attention to the beginning of this video, the first 45 minutes or so, because it's really important that you understand at least that. Now, keep in mind again that I don't go into details. If I wanted to teach you grammar, it would take years. I mean, literally. I mean, I've been doing the grammar study, the poem, since 2018. Okay. So here we are in 2022. Now, granted, I didn't work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on it. Like Forrest, he said he spent 15 years on a poem. You don't think he literally worked on it for 15 years. He probably only worked on it for maybe 6 months, but all of that 6 months of time was broken up into segments here and there. Well, it's the same thing here. But basically, for those who don't know, I've been searching since probably around late 2014. And initially, I was looking in Yellowstone in 2014 because everybody was going after the long hanging fruit. Hey, whatever. Hey, this looks like a TV. It's in Yellowstone, Madison Junction, all of that crap. I mean, the Faro River, yeah, okay. Millions and millions of people have thought that, and I was one of them, right? And then I was over up by Du Bois in Wyoming. One thing about me, though, I was always in Wyoming. I knew that it had to be in Wyoming. There was just never a doubt. A lot of other searchers, most of them, especially the one that you see on these documentaries and news, they spent 99% of their time searching in New Mexico. They didn't even go to Wyoming until the very end. Okay. And of course, they started with the low hanging fruit, Yellowstone. But anyway, after I went there, I went to Du Bois. And then after Du Bois, I went down to Lander. And then I was at Sinks Canyon. Then I was at the Lucky MC Mines. Then I was over at Meadowlark Lake in the Bighorns. Then I was at the Medicine Wheel. Then I was on Cody Road. Then I was up at Clark's Fork. All of these areas, especially when when I finally took on a partner that lived in Wyoming, because that meant that, because I can't afford to keep going to Wyoming. Okay. I visited 4 places, but I can't afford to keep going back. I mean, I just can't afford to do it. So I always want to try to find a partner in Wyoming. That was why I made this channel. That was why I posted a lot, because I wanted to attract thinkers. Okay. I like to think and analyze and work. I don't like to just, wander up and down streams all day, or, try to find synonymous locations on a map. And the reason for that is because that's what I did all the way up until 2017, around May of 2017. And I said, okay, I had it. I'm going back to the poem. Okay. And I'm going to treat this like a poem purist would. If the solve doesn't work with the poem, then it's not a good solve. And I threw everything away. I mean, I didn't literally throw it away, but I gave up on Lander, gave up on Lucky Mac, gave up on Du Bois, gave up on over by Cody, gave up on Cody Road, gave up on Meadowlark, gave up on the wheel, all of it. And I went back to the poem, and then I worked through the poem. And you know what I noticed? When you go through and analyze it like this, it made it easier for me to, right off the bat, pick an area, and within 10 minutes, I can invalidate my own solve. I'm like, no, it doesn't work with the poem. Okay, forget it. I was done of jumping all around the map. So as I started getting better and better at looking at the poem, I started being drawn back into the Bighorns, right, and back up north. No more down by Lander. I was completely done with that area. I knew that it wasn't there. The poem just doesn't work there. Okay. But anyway, the point is, as I went on and on and on and studied the poem more and more, okay, it just became obvious to me, real easy to go through this poem. And I said, hey, that's almost like a computer program. Okay, the poem itself, it's like an algorithm, except it's self-modifying. Okay, I don't know if you guys, any of you out there are programmers, but if you heard of self-modifying code, that's something that they do, for example, in the old days of copy protection. So if you tried to copy something and you didn't copy the code exactly, then when we went to go self-modify it, we would simply crash on purpose, and then the app would, the game or whatever wouldn't run. That's how that worked. Well, the poem is sort of the same way. He's telling you what to do, but all of the clues only exist in the poem. So if you follow the precise instructions in the poem, and whenever he makes reference to a clue, refer to that line in the poem. In other words, if he says, beginning where warm waters halt, well, they halt at the end of the line where warm waters halt, line 5. Okay? Just treat it like that. And I'm telling you that you'll see the poem in a whole new light. So, anyway, guys, have a good time for the rest of your weekend. Peace.